Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Varbeva-Daley, and I'm with BSI, which stands for British Standards Institution. Many thanks to Julia for inviting me today to talk to you about a relatively new and recent project, which is looking to bring together standards and sustainable finance, and it's exploring the role of standards in pushing forward the conversation around sustainable finance. I'm by no means a financial expert, so please bear with me. I have been working in the area of sustainability, energy, and environmental management for the past 15 years, mostly through a standardization prism and point of view, really. A very quick introduction to standards and standardization in BSI for those who are not familiar with this, and I'll explain why we're talking about standards in the context of the financial industry, in the context of sustainable finance in particular. Very briefly, BSI is the national standards body of the UK. Most countries have one of us. BSI happens to be the oldest one in the world with more than 100 years of history. We're not a government body, independent business services organization really, but we do work very closely with government and I established under a Royal Charter to develop standards and standardization in the public interest, to serve the public good really. We have a memorandum of understanding with government, and pursuant to that memorandum of understanding, we develop standards of relevance to the UK community, again in public interest, but also represent UK views in the development of European and international standards. And this is an overview of what the international standardization landscape looks like. There are many standardization organizations. It's a very hierarchical world. BSI is represented and works with all of these standardization organizations and is a founding member and a very prolific contributor to the work of the European standardization body, SEN, and also the International Standardization Organization. So what do we talk about when we talk about standards, and why are standards relevant to sustainable finance? Well, really, standards can be about anything and everything. A standard can be developed to cover all subjects and issues. They apply to all industries across all sectors. The very sophisticated way of describing standards would be an agreed way of doing something. It might sound like a very simplistic explanation of what standards are, but it actually has the key components of what is necessary to call something a standard, to call a document a standard. They are codified documents that bring together good practice and reflect good practice. They're developed by experts in the particular area, and they reflect consensus. So they follow a development process that is very much based on consensus building. Standards are very important in supporting trade and removing barriers to trade. They're key in encouraging innovation. Unlike the popular opinion, standards cannot be developed actually to preempt innovation and stifle innovation. On the contrary, they're designed for exactly the opposite purpose. They help individual organizations self-regulate, understand the subject better, introduce internal processes, share knowledge, manage costs better, etc., etc. And standards are also linked to regulation, but they're not regulation themselves. Standards are very often used by organizations to help them reach compliance with specific regulation or legislation. And recently, over the past 10 years, standards actually are very often used as an alternative to regulation. And I think in the area of sustainable finance, this is exactly the type of role that standards are seen to have as an alternative to regulation. Just a brief overview of what distinguishes standards and regulation, and just to emphasize the point that standards are not written by us, by BSI. They're written by experts, by industry contributors such as yourselves, We provide a platform for experts and different stakeholder groups to come together and build consensus around new subjects, new areas. Standards are also can be supported by measurement, testing, certification and accreditation, which brings a subject or a process, which brings an organization an extra credibility and introduces extra transparency in the marketplace. And assuming that most of you will not be familiar with the detail of what standards are and haven't had that much exposure to standards, just to mention that standards have been around for a while, and BSI, as the oldest NSB in the world, has had a significant footprint on the development of international standards of relevance to various industries. A lot of the international standards that you might be familiar with that are considered most popular and most used actually originated here in the UK as British standards. And I've highlighted some of the most prominent examples: environmental management, quality management, asset management also, business continuity management and risk management standardization. These all started as British standards and moved on to be developed as international standards, ISO standards. So what is this project all about? Simon and Julia helped me a lot by outlining some of the drivers of the sustainable finance conversation. We've been looking at those same drivers over the past 3 years. We've carried out significant engagement with a number of stakeholders, mostly with representatives of the financial industry or the financial sector. We've been observing the financial industry globally gearing up to understand what sustainable finance is better and moving themselves, financial organizations globally moving themselves closer to sustainable development and trying to align with sustainable development goals. We've also seen that sustainable finance, green finance, is becoming very important in national and international policy and regulatory agendas, particularly in the work of the European Union, the taxonomy work that Simon mentioned, and also in the UK, in the industrial strategy and the clean growth strategy. So it's the issue and the role of sustainable finance is climbing up the policy and the regulatory agenda. Over the past 3 years, we've spoken to industry, fund managers, financial advisors. However you want to segment the industry, we've probably spoken to the key stakeholder groups there about the key issues that they're experiencing and the level of understanding they have about sustainable finance, why it's important. And we've spoken to the industry about, is there a relationship with standards? Is there something that standards and standardization can contribute with in that arena? And some of the key issues that have been highlighted to us, they're displayed there. I'm not going to take you through the detail of it really, but it's all about building on already existing initiatives and even standards. However, looking to detail these a little bit further, to give them a bit of teeth by developing benchmarking mechanisms, clarifying the role of these initiatives to the wider community, bringing the wider investment community and financial community on board with such initiatives, really. One of the key issues that's been highlighted to us is the lack of common agreement and common understanding around what sustainable finance is and what it does and why it would be of value, why would sustainable financial services and products be of value. So building the business case and building common understanding around sustainable finance. And the main issue with which the conversation started really has been around how does the industry within the UK and globally go about integrating sustainability and ESG considerations into their strategies, into investment decisions, into their product and service offerings. So what is the process about that? What's considered best practice in sustainability and ESG integration? And it's those types of conversations and issues that have been highlighted to us. And in that conversation, we started slowly seeing the role. I'm being flagged. I'm going over time here, so I'll just whiz you very quickly through the program. The role of standards and standardization was highlighted as a mechanism that can be used to further that conversation and to help the industry deal with some of those issues and some of those barriers. And the role of standards was also recognized by UK government in the recent year. We're working, so now as a result of these conversations and the recognition of the role of standards, we're working very closely with UK government via BASE and UK industry via the Green Finance Initiative to develop and roll out a program of standards around sustainable finance. The program of standards around sustainable finance is something we started working on this year. Ultimately, we are hoping to establish UK leadership in sustainable finance by developing internationally applicable standards, so standards applicable to you and applicable to colleagues worldwide. And we are supporting government and industry objectives in this way. What the program is about is a holistic standards development approach to sustainable finance with several facets to it, but we are hoping to start with the development of several fast-track standards, as we call them, PASs, and we're hoping to then take those UK-led standards into ISO to inform the development of equivalent ISO standards and set a UK leadership example. This is an overview of the program. We've done a lot of engagement and scoping work in the beginning of the year, introduced the program formally at the March workshop event. Some of you might have attended that event. And at that event, we've agreed key priority areas that could be standardized. We then went on to have 3 individual workshops to narrow these areas down and decide what specific standards can be developed within each of those areas that will help the industry. And in parallel with that, we started the process at the ISO level, where we put forward a proposal for the establishment of a new area of technical work, a new technical committee on the subject of sustainable finance. We propose that the UK leads on supporting that committee and that BSI provides the secretariat for the committee. As a result of those scoping activities, we are now looking to kick off the work on 3 areas of standardization, 3 individual standards really, developed most likely as fast-track standards, as PASs. You can see what those 3 are likely to focus on. One will provide an overarching sustainable finance framework and will be written as a guidance information document really. The second one would be of interest to this audience. We'd be looking to set up a standard around sustainable investment management with requirements so that it can be later on assessed and certified against. And we are also looking at developing a standard at the product level, so how are products with purporting to have sustainability credentials reported and communicated externally. And that's the most recent development. Plus, as of last week, I can report that BSI's proposal to lead on international standardization on subject of sustainable finance has been heeded by ISO, and a new committee has been established with UK leadership. So as of next year, hopefully, the international standardization program work can begin as well. It's a massive achievement for the UK in terms of exporting UK know-how and setting up good examples. And I'll finish on that note with the invitation to you all to keep an eye on how the program is developing and share your views and experience and help shape up these future standards around sustainable finance. Thank you.
If I just touch on, just trying to put my finger on one thing as to why what Maria has just said is important. There's a lot of us here today who know this area and care deeply about it, and a good number of you I know agree with me that there really are different ways that things can be done. But the big elephant in the room in this industry at the moment, to a very large extent, is greenwash. And trust and your clients being able to know that what a fund says it does is what it actually does. Now, I'm not one to like putting shackles on anything, but I think we've got to a stage in this area where it's sufficiently big and urgent and important that really we've got to start putting markers in the sand and saying, we want people to disclose this, this, and this, and we want them to have these processes, and we want to be able to have an element of confidence when we're going out talking to clients and when we're pitching to a pension scheme or whatever, that we're comfortable with the funds that we're promoting. So obviously part of what I do with Fund Eco Market's about that, but obviously one of the reasons I'm very interested and I am talking with BSI on all of this and helping is because actually we've got to ramp it up. Otherwise, we're going to blow all our targets on climate change and everything if investors are pretending they're doing things and they're not actually doing it. So really important project. So anyway, so thank you for that, Maria.